All right, good evening to all. We're going to call the Committee of Infrastructure to order Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019 at 7 p.m. in the Automatic Chamber. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Tom Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Jan Schmidt, I am here. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Here.
And Alderman Ken Gidge will not be with us tonight.
Alderman Gidge did not contact, but he has been ill, so we wish him the best. Also in attendance, we have Alderman June Karen. Thank you. Okay. Public comment. I will now open up the meeting if anybody wishes to have a public comment at this particular time. Mr. Cody, thank you. Mr. Cody, can you please just say who your name, address, and who you represent, please? And thank you. You know the drill.
Scott Cody, I'm with the Southern Hampshire Medical Center, 8 Prospect Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. And I didn't know if I'd have an opportunity to speak to you in regards to Ordinance 036 during your deliberation or not. I'd like the opportunity to be able to do that when you get to that point if possible.
Mr. Cody, I tried to, in the past, I've tried to keep these things as informal as possible. So when the issue comes up, I may invite you up at that particular time and then to go over as part of the deliberations with your testimony.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cody. Anybody else would have any comment at all? Okay. Thank you. To the clerk, communications.
From Wayne Hubbard, Senior Traffic Engineer, read justification for removing the prohibition of right turns on red at the intersection of Costco Driveway and Daniel Webster Highway, which is US 3.
Thank you. There being no objection, I'll accept the communication and place it on file. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
We have Resolution 19-103, authorizing the conveyance of discontinued portions of Conant Road.
Okay. Alderman Jetty, do I have a motion?
Yes, I move for final passage of R-19-103.
Okay.
And I'd like to speak on that.
Alderman Jetty has moved to final passage of 19103. Can the Alderman speak to your motion, please?
Yes, this is a follow-up to a discussion, I can't remember, I think it was a resolution that we had before. So this involves property on Conant Road, specifically lots number,
It's 121?
the address is 119 and 121 Conant Road.
119.
And so this came up when the in the past, Conant Road had a different configuration, and it came closer to lots 119, 121, 122, and the last one on the corner there that I can't read from here, but I'm sorry? 62 McKenna. So the Conant Road used to get closer to those lots, and at some point in time in the past, Conant Road was reconfigured, and the paved portion of the roadway was moved further away from those lots. It had to do with the development of the, I think it's the Maplewood subdivision area. And so Conant Road was straightened, and the road was moved, the paved portion of the road was moved away from those lots. That left an area of land from the paved portion of Conant Road to those lots, which the homeowners maintained. They I don't remember if they planted seed, but they irrigated the area, they planted some trees, and they've taken good care of those areas. And the owners of 121 approached me about the possibility of their gaining ownership of that land between the paved portion of Conant Road and their lot. And I spoke to the legal department. The legal department explained that that could happen, and they explained how they did it. The people involved hired, at the direction of the engineering department, hired a surveyor. They drew plans. There was back and forth between their surveyor and the city. The various utilities had to be consulted and obtain permission. And as the end result, this committee recommended to the full board, and the full board adopted a resolution allowing lots 119 and 121 to gain the portion of the land between Conant Road and their lots. And that was approved. And then the legal department drew up the necessary deeds. And so now here we are. And this resolution is to authorize the city to convey the portion of land between Conant Road and 119 and Conant Road and 121 to give them the ownership of that property. And so that's, I think it's just a mere formality following up on what we've already voted on.
Okay. If we could pause right now, Alderman Jettie, if you can. Would Alderman Lopez, would you mind go to see if we're actually on the air?
Sure.
And if he's ready. I think with the weather conditions, I don't know exactly. So. And to the folks at home, I don't know if we're live or on Memorex or what we're doing right at this particular time. So we'll stand and wait until, but we are being recorded,
Okay.
so the minutes will be kept as according. So
You've dated yourself, Mr. Chairman.
I know with Memorex.
Big time. All set?
We're all set? Thank you. Okay, very good. I'll open up to questions, and if I may, Alderman Jettie, the people in 121, they're the petitioners, correct?
Correct.
And they are aware that, I guess, with this quick deed, their property line now will go, basically perpendicular to the road, so they understand all that and everything. And that has been mapped out accordingly, and they're in full agreement.
Yes, the plans have been redrawn several times to the satisfaction of the city engineer and their surveyor, and they're fully aware of what it says and what it is. And you're right, from that point, from
Where my
near the
arrow is,
cursor
yeah.
there,
Yeah,
from that point, it's a line that goes pretty much perpendicular to the center line of Conant Road. I think technically I think it goes to the center line of the old Conant Road, and then from the old Conant Road to the center line of the new Conant Road. So there's a little jog there, but it's been approved by the city engineering department, and they're aware of that.
very good. Any questions from any of the members of the board? Seeing none. Okay, we have a motion before us to recommend final passage. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. New business ordinances.
We have ordinance 19035, rescinding the right-of-way on Red Prohibition from Costco exit onto Daniel Webster Highway.
If I can see if we can bring it up, I put Costco and it doesn't, so let's magically see if we can fly.
Do you remember the address, Jim?
Flying to the south end. Someday I'll learn how to, oh, yep, there we go. Ramp, yeah. Down. Getting close, and, yeah. Brook Village, ramp,
That way,
yeah,
yeah.
down a little bit more,
Nope, this is Massachusetts,
Yeah.
so it's keep going that way.
yeah. There we are. Okay, thank you to my beautiful clock. Thank you so much, we got it here. Okay, we got it up on the board. We have 019-035, rescinding the right-of-way on Red Prohibition and Costco exit onto Daniel Webster Highway. The clerk, would you like to make a motion?
I would, I'd like to recommend final passage.
Okay, we have a motion of final passage. There any questions by any members of the board? We did get a letter from Wayne Husband, Senior Traffic Engineer, on it. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Oh, yes, Alderman Karen,
Yeah,
please.
thank you. I just asked Wayne Husband to write the memo out to kind of give you an explanation as to why we wanted to rescind this. We did this kind of right turn on the Daniel Webster Highway further up where the elderly housing is off the highway, and they put the signage to show that they had to yield to U-turns and left turns on green lights. And because Jordan's has taken over where the former used car lot dealership is, there is no need to have that no turn on right anymore. And this will also speed up the traffic, moving the traffic down that hill onto the highway. So I think that this is a good thing, you know, that we can do this. And with the approval of the traffic department, I think it's something that we should look to moving forward. And I appreciate you inviting me here.
And I think this would help expedite the famous Spitford Road traffic congestion to
Yes,
some degree.
right. There is traffic that comes from BAE, from their other facility up in that area, so.
Okay. We have a motion before us on 019-035 by Alderman Schmidt to recommend final passage. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Cowan. To the clerk.
Next, we have ordinance 19-036, designating an additional section of Bauer Street one-way easterly.
Okay. Would Alderman Lopez like to make a motion, or would you like to discuss prior to the motion?
I'd like to make a motion for final passage so we can have the discussion.
Okay. There's a motion by Alderman Lopez to recommend final passage. Seeing for additional comment without objection, I will like to invite former Alderman Scott Cody to come forward, please. And you want to grab your favorite chair unless somebody was sitting. There you
She
go.
warmed it up for him.
Okay. Right, at this particular time, I will open up the discussion to the main sponsor, Alderman Lopez.
So I received constituent complaints that there were people parking on the street, on Bauer Street, that traffic was accelerating. They attributed this to changes in the parking lot design by Southern New Hampshire Medical Center and the installation of a fence. So Director Photo, Engineer Dukran, and the DPW department looked at the road and assessed it, and they concluded the road was actually too narrow for two-way street traffic. So what they're proposing is rendering it one way in an easterly direction from Dearborn to Harbor Ave. I did get feedback from people on Harbor Ave. I thought to ask them, like, would this affect their, commute home and all that? And their consensus was really no. They use the streets on either side anyway. And while there would be a slight inconvenience for people on Bauer Street, on one end of the street, they can use Prospect Street, which is adjacent, for the same purpose.
I hope and I think, did I not cue this up? I think We did. I think the one that's in question, if we have it right, is you're talking Alderman Lopez from Dearborn Street to Harbor Avenue. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Okay, very good, and that's what seems to be on the board.
It might
All-
be, if you can get the layer for the satellite, it might be helpful to view the houses too.
Man, you're really pushing. Yeah, we can. You can see the houses, but let me try here.
They're all on one side, so there might be some room for compromise.
When I used to be on the fire department, I played with this an awful lot, but
Mr. Chairman, it's the next box over.
you go over.
One more block?
So it's see where the 4 is? Nope,
Why don't you click it down?
Oh, right here?
The
Nope.
minus.
if you go back up to the main menu bar and go over to the 4 icons that are to the right of the one that you were just on,
He's telling you to go to the icon.
right?
That
Not,
one?
go
No,
one,
not that
go
one.
2 more, one more,
One more?
right there.
Okay.
Click on that, and then
Oh,
that will
There's a
give
free
you the
tutorial
aerials.
on how to use
Ah.
GIS.
thank you.
Parcels
welcome.
with aerials. Are you trying to tell us, Mr. Cody, you played with this before?
I spend a lot of time on that, yes,
All
sir.
right. Thank you for your assistance. I do have Alderman Lopez, if I may start the discussion, then I may hear from Mr. Cody, but I do have a question on Bauer Street, and if you kind of follow, you see where the property is marked number 17,
Mhm.
and there is 2 parking lots involved. And I understand the people on Bauer Street, and we're talking probably from 21 to 37, but looking at these 2 particular parking lots, if anybody tried to come in from Harbor Avenue, that would be a one-way at that particular point, and they would not be able to access that particular 2 parking lots. I do see that perhaps they could go in via Prospect and then come in and go through a parking lot. And I'm gonna refer to Mr. Cody, because I think, is this not your property or one of your properties? Then I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Cody, please. Thank you.
I have a campus map that I'd like to share with you if I could, because I think it
Yes, you
shows.
may, please.
It's an updated plan from what's there.
I'll come and get it.
I'll save you the trouble.
Oh,
Pass
thank
it
you.
around.
I'll take 2, please, if you have enough. Thank you.
So thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to this issue. So the lot that you see directly across from 17 Prospect Street is not shown as developed in this aerial view that's here. But as you can see, it has been developed over the past 2 years. It's a 125-car parking lot that is used to support the 17 Prospect Street building. And the concern I have about
It's really bigger.
the concern I have about the suggestion that you had just made is that the throughway for the parking lot that's in front of 17 Prospect Street does not align with the entrance to either of the entranceways across the way. You would have to actually make a jog through that parking lot in order to be able to get across there to get in.
Oh, I see.
And my concern is that I think that, go ahead, how are you? My concern is
Mr.
that,
Cody, and if I may, we're blessed and very fortunate to have Mr. Cummings to join us this evening. So can the clerk
I
please record that
certainly
Mr.
can.
Cummings? Thank you, Mr. Cummings.
Absolutely.
Just
So our-
continue, Mr. Cody.
Our concern is that I think that this ordinance may actually have the reverse impact, because I think it's going to drive a lot of the traffic. If this is a one-way street going down from Dearborn to Harbor, it's going to drive a lot of the traffic that normally would come in off of Harbor Avenue, actually down Bauer Street, and probably add to the congestion of traffic and so forth going past those residential homes. I had the opportunity to have a brief conversation with Alderman Jettie before this meeting, and I was saying, well, to try to find some sort of a compromise for these folks, I'd be okay if it was a one-way going in the other direction to Dearborn, but I'm not sure from a traffic perspective that having 2 one-way streets come together at Dearborn Street makes a whole lot of sense to be able to do that. But our concern, obviously, is that this is going to have a real negative impact on being able to access that end of the property for 17 Prospect Street. Now, Alderman Lopez is right that we recently redeveloped the parking lot that is off of Dearborn Street and Prospect Street. And you can see on this campus map that we tore 24 Dearborn Street down and combined that to make one larger parking lot in that area. We have an awful lot of issues in this neighborhood with people in residential homes parking in our parking lots, and that's a problem. So what we've done is we've tried to keep that parking available, obviously, for our patients that are coming in, and in doing so have put up landscaping and fencing to restrict how you can get there. So at one point in time, there used to be a fair amount of access to this parking lot from Bowers Street, and that's no longer the case. We actually eliminated 2 driveway cuts along Bowers Street, fenced it, and restricted the entrance to this parking lot from Prospect Street only to try to eliminate that problem. So I don't know if that's causing more, residential traffic to park out on Bowers Street or not, but just the same, it's the medical center's parking lot, and we want to make sure that we keep that available for our patients and staff. So again, I think the last concern is that we think a one-way street going down from Dearborn Street to Harbor Ave is going to have a real negative effect in terms of being able to access that parking lot and cause more traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Cody. If I may, one question to Alderman Lopez. What is the primary you heard from your constituents on this on Bauer Street? And
Well, and actually, I'm glad Director Cummings
what
is
would
here.
focus to alleviate with their wishes here?
Right. Their focus was more, I think, the parking and the speed of traffic. So I've had lots of experience with constituents reporting concerns about speed, and typically it's more directly related to the number of cars passing by than it is the actual speed. So if a road becomes very busy, such as Central Street or Ledge Street, or streets that I've worked with in the past, it could be perceptual just because so many more cars are passing through there. So that could be happening as people are trying to pass through that area on a two-way street, which is way too narrow, and it should be a one-way street, which would make it a smoother flow. But the other element was that people were parking on the road. And if they're parking on the side of the road in a street that's already determined to be too narrow to be a two-way street, it's not even really a one-way street because there's someone parking in the road. So that was why I think Director Cummings might be able to shed some light on this. This was originally part of the, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but we were talking about this 2 years ago at the overnight parking things. You might have some ideas.
We have heard, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development, and parking, for better or for worse, falls under my office's purview. And so we have heard over the years that residents in this area need parking, and they need on-street parking. And so we do know that is something that we keep in the forefront of our mind. We recently went through an analysis and an exercise to update our overnight parking. And where that is allowed. Unfortunately, I do not believe that Bowers Street in this particular neighborhood has made that onto the list of streets. But I do know that is something that this neighborhood is interested. I know Alderwoman Karen also has approached me about these concerns because she's hearing from her constituents that parking in and around this neighborhood needs to be addressed.
Mr. Cody, if I may, and you don't have to give an answer this evening, other than the fact that if it is plausible or not. If parking is part of the problem for the people in this section of Bowers Street, if they're off your lots at a certain time, is it plausible to be in the good neighbor policy that they could utilize a lot and be out by particularly 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that? I mean, is there a deal that could be amicably made with residents on that?
So we've tried that, and it's not been successful. We've had issues with vehicles being left abandoned, particularly in the way during snow removal efforts and so forth. So we have found that really has not worked out well for us.
Uh-huh. All right, thank you for trying. Alderman Jettie.
So, is there parking on Bowers Street now?
Overnight, no.
or anytime?
Daytime.
I believe, yeah, during the day, yeah.
During the day, there's parking there, and is that part of the problem? Who's I guess I'm wondering who's parking there? Is it the residents or is it the hospital employees that are parking there during the day? Do you know? You don't know?
Don't.
I can answer that.
Can Mr. Cody answer that?
I can answer
Mr.
that. 'Cause
yes,
we
please.
monitor it, so
Please.
I can assure you that there are not hospital employees that are parking down on Bauer Street. We happen to hear frequently from our hospital employees about how far they have to walk now,
Right.
and that would be a bit further of a distance for them to be able to go. So the on-street parking that's occurring there, my assumption, based on what I've seen, is that it's either residents that are there during the day, or there's a possibility that it's parking that's spilling over from Greater Nashville Mental Health.
Alderman Lopez.
So I'm pretty sure I use that building when I go to the doctors, and I've attempted approaching it from Bowers, and that's not really doable. So I don't think it's the people that are customers there or participating in it. I'm fairly certain it's people from Bowers Street that are parking there because now there's a fence between them and the parking lot they were not supposed to be using that they were using. So that kind of is where the rub is there isn't enough on-street parking for those neighbors. I don't know necessarily the disposition of units, but I do know that a lot of them don't have driveway space. They're right on the edge of the road. It was one of those awkward designs you get in an inner city where everyone is thinking what's right in front of them, and they're not necessarily thinking like, what about where you're going to park? I
So
think-
two-tier problem, Alderman Lopez, is parking, but it's the amount of volume on the particular street too, correct?
I think the proposition that the DPW presented would potentially allow for on-street parking, although we should probably ask them that if we were to add this street to the program. But they were also looking at the width of the road, saying like, there's no way you can have two-way traffic on it. So I think Mr. Cody's request in terms of switching the direction is at least worth looking at. But I think DPW was looking at the issue from the perspective of how the residents were dealing with parking and how the traffic was going through a residential street.
In looking at the map on Bauer Street, if you can follow where my cursor is, probably my question to Mr. Cummings is it not, to look at all points of view here, is it not possible to have two-way traffic on a partial from Harbor Avenue to the end of the property line of number 17 there, and then have do not enter at that particular point? Now, if people need to put a one-way street, people need to have a turnaround and everything, and it does seems we have two parking lots there that may be able to encompass that. So people coming from Mr. Cody's map, which is quite a larger parking lot that includes this area here and this area here, there would have to be signs saying right turn only to exit to Harvard Avenue and do not enter westerly up Bauer Street, and only partially cut off the Bauer Street. And I'm not looking for an answer tonight. I think what I would like to do with this is send it back to try to come up with a better solution, because I don't think we're going to do it this evening.
I agree. I would echo those sentiments, Mr. Chairman. I would raise the outline that you just made may bring about some public safety concerns that I think what we should do is ask our engineering department to go back and look at this and take some of the concerns that have been raised tonight into consideration and see if we can develop a better design to move this forward.
And I think that's a capital idea. Let's get our engineering department to revisit this and take a look at it and to see where we are. So therefore, my question, Alderman Lopez, would you like to withdraw your vote?
And I think in addition, it might not be a bad idea for me to try to get into the neighborhoods. I mean, lately it's been like a blizzard deal going on. But it might be worth asking them, like, are those your cars? Would you park on an adjacent street that's wider if we gave you that option versus having no option? You know, I mean, I think it's probably a good idea to check with them. It's not even that many houses.
Okay. So would you like to withdraw your motion of final passage to table it to perhaps maybe the next meeting where we might be a little bit more, have more information? And can I invite Mr. Cody back to that particular meeting?
Yeah, I think
And,
that's a good idea.
and to see what we come up with and see if we have something that we all can agree on. Do you agree, Alderman Lopez?
Yep, I'd like to move the table until our next meeting.
Okay, yes, Alderman Jettie.
Before we table it, because I think tabling it stops discussion, right?
Tabling does stop the discussion, but there has not yet been a motion to table. Okay.
But
So we're more into the parliamentary inquiry at this particular point. We do have a standing motion, and what would have procedurally would have to be that Alderman Lopez would have to rescind his motion and then come up with a motion to table.
Okay, I just wanted a chance to say something.
Alderman Jettie, please do.
So, I think it's a great idea to have the engineering department look at this more closely and come up with some recommendations. I would like them to think about, if the neighbors are complaining about speed, you people who have been on this committee longer than I have probably know this better than I do. But one-way streets seem to increase speed on roadways. I work on Factory Street, and I know that cars zip down Factory Street at a pretty good clip. And when streets are two ways, because there's approaching traffic, it seems to cause people to go more slowly. So that's one thought. The other thought is that, we ought to have the engineering department, or the traffic engineering department ought to look at, kind of an overall plan for one-way streets. Otterson is one way going from Main Street east, and they've got that, I think they still have that situation where Otterson from Harbor Avenue is I don't know if it's one way or two ways, but it comes up, and the traffic coming from Main Street going east runs up into traffic coming from Harbor Avenue going west, and head on there. And I think that's a situation we would prefer to avoid. I thought about whether we could alternate the one way, but Mr. Cody tells me that there would be a problem with their garage that is on Bowers Street. I guess the lower level of the garage is only, you can only enter it from Bowers Street, so whether that would be a problem for them. But the idea of having Bowers be one way from Harbor Avenue all the way to Main Street, and have Otterson Street one way from Main Street all the way to Harbor Avenue, seems to me like it would be a better solution. But I'm just saying that so that it'd be thought about before they come back to us with a plan.
Thank you.
Cummings.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to answer some of the questions just raised, or to further clarify some of the points made. First, so when you're talking about urban design, two-way streets don't necessarily slow traffic, though I understand that may be the perception, because with two-way traffic, what you're doing is you're creating, impediments by bringing another lane of traffic going the reverse direction into the roadway. You can achieve the same goals by other types of traffic calming measures, because ultimately the way you reduce speed is by changing how you design the road. You can add more expansive sidewalks, street trees, bring the buildings up closer to the curb. All these differing strategies will result in reducing the speed of vehicles, as does two-way traffic. That is definitely a strategy. One-way traffic wouldn't necessarily cause additional increase in speed if you were to incorporate some of these other design elements. And then relative to a bigger holistic plan for reversing of the one-ways, the city has undertaken this initiative. I want to say back in 2015, VHB produced a report on behalf of the city. It was prior to my arrival. I have a copy of it in my office. I'll be happy to share it with anyone who's interested. It's called the Downtown Circulation Study. It was done as part of the requirement for the Broad Street Parkway, where it looked at the whole downtown area and how one-way reversals may be necessary, and if you were to implement them, and this happens inevitably if you do implement these one-way reversals, they start a trigger effect of dominoes that you need to then take corrective actions other places so you maintain the same level of service. That's the ultimate goal that, as I understand it, traffic engineers aspire to when they undertake such an initiative. So it's oftentimes done in holistic plans and not in isolation, so you can maintain that same level of service. So thank you.
If I may.
Well, I think at this particular point, I would like to have all the stakeholders present, which seems to be Mr. Cummings, Alderman Lopez, and of course, Mr. Cody, if work together and see if there's something that we can come up with. And Alderman Jettie, if you have that keen interest, you're welcome to join them as well. But the main thing, I think I would like to get the engineering study, and can you make sure that comes out to all the committee members so we can look at it too?
Yes,
And then,
please. Is it online?
you know,
Circulation study?
yeah.
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 I mean, Mr. Cummings, could you make sure that each member gets a copy of that so we can peruse it before the next,
An electronic copy.
an electronic company is satisfactory?
Yeah, I'll send the
Absolutely.
link.
I didn't think I had to say in 2019 an electronic copy, but I think electronic copy would do.
But the study
Yes,
is
Mr. Cody.
definitely on the city
Drawing.
website right now. You just got to find it. It's right there.
Thank you for just allowing me to make a few closing comments to some of the commentary that's been going on. If, a couple of questions I want to ask the city. If you're going to move forward and make decisions about one-way streets in this area based on the width of the street, as Alderman Jettie has mentioned, I think it's important for you to look at the streets that are surrounding it. Like if you look at East Otterson Street, it is far narrower than anything that you're looking at on Bauer Street at this point. That intersection that you spoke of, at the intersection of where East Otterson Street joins Fletcher Court and Dearborn Street, that intersection's not aligned at all. It's off by about 20 or 30 feet. So when the traffic enters that intersection, motorists are unsure which way to go and who's to go next because it's not aligned. So if you were to actually consider making Bowers Street a one-way to Dearborn and keeping Bowers Street a one-way from Main to Dearborn, at least the intersection aligns. And from that point, you have the opportunity for better traffic control if that's a consideration. But I believe that East Otterson Street is a problem, and I think Tyler Street is a problem in terms of its access. All right, so if decisions are going to be made on street widths, let's look at the bigger picture of things, because I agree that if you make a change on Bowers Street, it's going to dramatically change the traffic pattern for the whole campus. So I think we need to really have a close understanding of that, and I would ask for that consideration, please.
Alderman Lopez.
I would just like to clarify that I represent residents, and while I appreciate the hospital, the residents aren't the one who built the fence, and they're not the one who designed the driveway that's not pointing the way that it needs to. So the city is looking at how it impacts residents. And while there's definitely some truth to looking at a larger picture, it doesn't mean do nothing and because there's somewhere else that something should be done. We can look at the neighborhood, but at the same time, we weren't the one who initiated the changes that caused this in the first place.
Could I respond to that, please? Because I actually take great offense with that comment. The improvements that we made on that property is because it's property that the Southern New Hampshire Medical Center owns. We went through the planning board process to do that. We're completely open and upfront about the fact that we wanted to control how parking was occurring on that site. So the suggestion that we made an improvement on our property for the service of our patients that denigrates the neighborhood is offensive.
And thank you, Mr. Cody and to Alderman Lopez and to others, I would like to discuss a decorum issue. I think whenever we come up with something like this, particularly in the infrastructure community, it's got to have a yin and a yang effect to all the stakeholders that are applied. I don't think there was any malice to any of this, but we got to look at all stakeholders, whether it be the business community as well as our good friends, our elected people who elect us, the residential community, and we need to look at that. And I think we need to get a lot more information, and I would like to see a lot more information come to this particular board on something like this that is delicate to the downtown or any traffic pattern within the city. And to have it looked at, engineering, have it to work with Mr. Cummings' department and to come in so that we can probably take it like a sphere and look at it, a box and cube it and look upside down, inside out and everything else like that. Unfortunately, we're kind of this, and I would feel much, much more comfortable in looking at it at a later date when we have Mr. Cummings gets us the engineering report and we can address it at that particular time. But I do ask for the decorum issues that we all work together on this and to make sure, because I think we can come up with a resolve that everybody, the intention is, particularly stakeholders and the residents, can live with. It may not satisfy everybody. I didn't become an alderman to please everybody, but the thing is, try to do the best that we possibly can in government. And Mr. Lopez, Alderman Lopez, I hope your comments are on topic on this.
I
And
mean, since I am an alderman and I am the one who is trying to motion to postpone until next week or next month so that we could do that study, I was wondering if now I could make that motion?
what motion? Sorry, with the.
The motion to postpone this until next meeting so that we can look at the whole neighborhood, the region.
You're
and have the
rescinding your
stakeholders
motion, a
involved.
final passage, and you want to make a new motion is to postpone or table until the next meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay, there's a new motion before us by Alderman Lopez to recommend tabling until the next infrastructure meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none? The motion to table is granted. Okay. And again, would like to have the stakeholders that are here this evening to, come forward and to be good. All right, to the clerk, general discussion.
I have nothing.
Okay.
Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
So this is not the only place where there's more cars than apparently parking spaces. There are other areas, in the Elm Street area, for example, where there's literally more residents than spaces. Director Cummings' department worked to add and formalize the on-street parking, and they're already past the capacity. So I think in discussion with legal and some other aldermen, it might be an idea to put a recommendation in that the good neighbor or the tenant rights contract also include a statement of what parking is available to a tenant when they move in, so that they're not under the impression that they'll be parking and then they move in and find out there is no parking, or that they have to move 3 or 4 blocks over, just to make sure that there's clear communication, because I know it can get a little bit muddy when one person's trying to make a deal to get into an apartment, another person's trying to make a deal to get a tenant. Like, just making sure we keep everything objective when they're making that agreement might help people enter into situations a little more prepared for it.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Any other general discussion? Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing none. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman Lopez.
There's a special election on Tuesday. Please, everybody come and vote.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. If I can echo that, there is a special election coming up this Tuesday. It's an opportunity for our citizens to express their particular points of view. And we all love and respect, Brian, and his vacancy has left a hole in the city. But I hope with the election that's pending next week that that hole will be filled, and we'll see. And it's up to to the good people, the voters, on who wins. So good luck to both candidates, and look forward to that. Any other remarks by Alderman? Seeing none. There's no need for any non-public session. So, Alderman Lopez.
To adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned at
7:45.
7:45. Thank you.